this memo is nothing but the distilling, the reducing of thousands of pages of documents provided to us by the Department and the Bureau. So there's nothing in this memo that the Department is not already aware of. If you think your viewers want to know whether or not the dossier was used in court proceedings, whether or not it was vetted before it was used, whether or not it's ever been vetted, if you are interested in who paid for the dossier, if you're interested in Christopher Steele's relationship with Hillary Clinton and the Democrat National Committee, then yes, you'll want the memo to come out. If you're Adam Schiff, who is consistently wrong when it comes to issues of disclosure, he didn't want us to find out any of this information, Chris. He fought. In fact, GPS went to court. Fusion GPS went to court to keep us from finding out that the Democrats paid for the dossier. So if you're Adam Schiff, of course you don't want the information to come out. You didn't want us to find it in the first place. This memo answers what I think are really legitimate questions, and I do think the FBI should look at it before it is released, and I have provided that counsel to Chairman Nunes, and I think that he has taken that under advisement. So I want to play face-up poker. I want the Bureau to know everything that's in the memo. I think you'll be surprised. It is not a hit piece on the Department and the FBI. I would not have participated in it if that's what it was.
Let me pick up on this, because the reports are, and you've kind of indicated that in your answer, that the memo centers on this question of the FISA application, the Department of Justice FBI application in 2016 for a warrant to conduct electronic surveillance against this fella, then Trump campaign manager Carter Page. Your complaint, according to reports, is that you say that when they made that application, they didn't talk about the role of the Russia dossier, and especially the fact that it was opposition research paid for by the Clinton campaign. The Democrats, and yes, Adam Schiff is leading the charge, say you're cherry-picking the information. One, that the FISA warrant on it, Carter Page, is not as central as you're making it, and two, that there was a lot more in the application than just the dossier, that the FBI did not rely just on the dossier to get the warrant.
Well, I can't even confirm for you that there is a FISA warrant, and I can't confirm for you who it's on because that is classified, and I'm not going to disseminate classified information. I'll just ask you again, are you interested in whether or not the world's premier law enforcement agency relied on a work product produced, paid for by the Democrat National Committee? Are you interested in whether or not
I guess the question I'm just asking is this, sir. And yes, I can understand you're not going to confirm it, but we're talking about the FISA warrant of Carter Page. Did they rely just on the dossier, or did they rely on a lot of other material?
Well, for me to answer that question is confirmation that there is one. Let me ask you this, Chris. If they relied on it half, is that significant enough for the American people to know? If they relied on it at all, do you want to know that? If you're the judge, do you want to know if a third of what you're providing to the court was paid for by a political opponent? So whether it was relied upon 80% or 20%, do you want to know that the Democrat National Committee paid for material that was never vetted, that was included in a court proceeding? Do you want to know whether or not the primary source in these court proceedings had a bias against one candidate? Do you want to know whether or not he said he'd do anything to keep that candidate from becoming elected?
The big question now for President Trump and the country is whether the revelations in that FISA memo are reason enough to end Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. Let's ask former FBI spokesperson John Iannarelli in Minneapolis, and with me here in Washington, David Rifkin, an attorney who served in both the Reagan and Bush 41 administrations. David, I want to start with you. Should this Mueller investigation be ended with what you know now?
I would not say it should be ended, but it certainly is troubling, and if further investigation reveals that there are additional misconduct that led to the Mueller investigation.
Well, this memo says that the FISA warrants were applied for with the essential element in those warrants being the dossier. They admitted a material fact to the FISA judge, namely that the dossier was an Oppo research document from Trump's opponent.
Which they did not tell the FISA court.
Right, but I'm curious about why you say this is just one, if they find out more. I mean, what else could there, I guess there could be more. But isn't that enough? I mean, if you are essentially lying to a federal judge in the middle of a political campaign 2 weeks before an election, And doesn't that show a motivation that's not exactly pure as the driven snow?
No, but of course, it's very troubling. It should be investigated.
Troubling?
But Mueller himself or his staff are not directly involved in this. I would rather focus on what...
Yeah, but it was started, David, because...
No, I understand the fruit of a poisonous tree. But look, even if there is no Mueller investigation, what happened here is enormously troubling. It's a serious misconduct by the FBI and DOJ. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's prosecute the people involved. I would rather focus on the merits of a case versus talking about, at this stage, what are its implications.
John, I think the FBI today, if I were a veteran of the FBI, I wouldn't be mad at the Trump people or Nunes. I'd be mad at the leadership of the FBI who allowed the agency to be politicized and, frankly, used in many ways by people who had an agenda against this candidate, Trump, and then after the election, President Trump. I think the FBI agents were used, and the upper echelon on the FBI made huge, huge judgments of error at the very least.
I think there's many people today inside and outside the FBI that feel exactly the same way. First and foremost, there is no reason an investigation of this magnitude should be run out of FBI headquarters. The Washington field office has 1,000 agents, teams of people that do this sort of thing. This is a problem of management to have let the executive leaders allow this to occur. That's one of the things Director Wray needs to address and address immediately.
Well, I still am trying to figure out why Director Wray was saying there's a grave concern about releasing this memo. The memo has nothing classified in it. There are no sources, no methods, no compromised foreign agents' names, none of that. Like, all of that. Why were they putting out, including Wray, why were they putting out these false justifications for keeping that memo secret? That, to me, is very concerning. And I have no reason to not like Christopher Wray. I'm sure he's a wonderful person, but why are you saying it's going to be grave damage? People doing the grave damage to the FBI or the FBI leadership.
Simple answer, because it looks bad for the FBI. It's pure self-protection, which dovetails with the fact that it took over a year to turn this over and required a threat of a contempt.
Explain what you're saying. To slow it down.
It took a year for the congressional committees to get this information.
Oh, from the FBI. It's like pulling teeth.
It took a threat of contempt. It's pulling teeth. It has nothing to do with classified information. It has to do with the fact this is a serious misconduct that makes FBI look bad.
What should happen now that...
Serious investigation. But let me just flag one thing.
Yeah.
It's not just what was in this application. The timing is very, very
suspicious
of the application. 2 weeks
October
before
21st.
the election, right. Why not do it months earlier? Why not do it after the elections? There's a DOJ policy that's reflected in the 2012 memo by Eric Holder and the Attorney General, which says you don't investigate, absent exceptional circumstances, political campaigns because of a danger it would leak and interfere with the electoral process.
Why did he write that memo? Is that because during the Benghazi stuff? Or was that Benghazi?
Well, let's assume that he wrote it because
Okay.
he believed that this was the right thing to do. But yes, it was during the 2012 elections. You don't do this unless it's absolutely essential. So the real question is not only why did you withhold information from a court, why did you do it on October 21, 2016, 2 weeks before the elections? What was the urgency?
John, what happens to the leadership of the FBI now, given what we learned today in this memo? And we're hearing that there's more to come. This is just the tip of the iceberg as to what we're going to learn. And I can't wait to see what it is. But what should happen, John?
Well, I see it happening already with Director Wray. There's movements being made, somewhat glacially, but changes are happening at headquarters. You saw Mr. McCabe leave just earlier this week, and in his place is now a deputy director that's very highly regarded throughout the rank and file of the FBI. You're also starting to see other movements with executive leaders in the FBI. I think the first thing Director Wray needs to do is make sure they have wiped the slate clean of these people that perhaps had political agendas and are not doing what good FBI agents are charged with doing, remaining apolitical and protecting the Constitution of the United States.
And, David, we're almost out of time, but the Comey's chief of staff, former chief of staff on TV today, and he said, oh, well, you guys, they could have gone to the FISA judge and told them about the provenance of this dossier, who paid for it, who funded it. There were things that they could have done instead of releasing this memo.
That's not how it works, and it's not enough to go with IG. Most things have to be investigated in the public light. Doing it privately is not how we deal with serious misconduct by the government. That's not what happened with 9/11. That's not, by the way, what the Senate side did with Dianne Feinstein, accusations of CIA torture, et cetera, et cetera. It has to be done in a public eye.
Gentlemen, fantastic segment.